Welcome back to the channel. This is Robert at Retro Car Guy 530. This video will hopefully delve into what a solution might be for my noise issue on a 2004 Chevrolet SSR. The multifunction turn signal switch, when I turn on the left or right turn signal and I move the steering wheel just a little bit, there's some plastic on plastic noise coming from it when the cab is heated up. So we'll check out what the root cause of that is. Hopefully it's just a lubrication issue. But we'll see what it is, and after the intro I'll show you the tools that I believe necessary for the task. If I miss anything, I'll come back and add some text over those list of tools. But let's start digging into it and see what we find. Please review the automotive information, repair, and modification guidelines on this screen. Seek the advice of a repair professional if you're unsure how to perform any repair or modification safely and correctly. All repairs and modifications are performed at your own risk. Here are the items I believe to be necessary in today's attempted repair of my noise issue on the 2004 Chevrolet SSR multifunction switch and steering column noise. So this side is the cleanup part. Of course, I have some Xano detailer to help clean up some items I may leave fingerprints on, or some Windex like window cleaner if necessary, and a microfiber towel. But the main part of the tools are over here. I'm going to take a little bit more elaborate path in removing a couple of the dash trim pieces to gain more room around the steering column panels. So you may choose to follow another path by just removing the panels themselves, but it's a very tight fit. So I'll show you the way I would recommend, and you can choose whichever way you might choose to attack this. But I'm going to remove the trim pieces that run from side to side on the dash, the ones that go around the HVAC knobs in the center. So the full side, both the one on the left side of the driver's side of the steering column and the passenger side that runs the full length. That gives me access to the screws underneath. So I'm going to use this plastic trim removal tool to pop that out safely without scratching it, and then to remove the steering column adjustment lever, I'm going to use this tool to get underneath that and pop it out. It doesn't take much force. I'd rather use something plastic to pop that out as well. When it comes to removing the cover for the top cover, there's a E5 inverted Torx screw that's in there. So I'm going to use this socket for that purpose. Some SSRs do actually have some T20 Torx screws on the bottom cover. I've never had one that actually had that, but you might need a T20 Torx screwdriver to remove those, but you'll definitely need it later on to remove the T20 Torx screws for the multifunction switch. And of course I have a 7mm socket, and I have that because I'm going to be removing some of the screws on the lower trim dash trim panel to help give that extra space. And when it comes to inspecting stuff, I'll have an extra flashlight, inspection mirror, and the lubricant I end up using is a Sil Glide, which actually is a brake caliper pin lubricant, but it has no smell to it, and it's high temperature resistant. So since my issue seems to be temperature related, it's silicone based lubricant, and so that's what I'm using on this particular one. You could use a white lithium grease, anything that's going to have some staying power given the heat situation. I believe that's causing this. I'm going to remove the trim pieces in here to allow me to access to the screws that hold the lower section to the metal pieces behind the decorative trim pieces for the dashboard here. That will allow me to drop this particular section a little bit further to give me better access to the lower steering column panel. So let's go ahead and remove those. These only go on one way, so it's not too worrisome, and they all fit each other, so there's no one knob that goes in a certain position. I'm going to use some plastic trim removal tools to pop out the trim piece here. Need to open up my coin tray there. And this should pop out fairly easy. Here's some metal clips that pop into the instrument panel. Let me get it all the way across here. And usually it comes out easiest from the passenger side first because it does interact with the steering column a bit there. And now you can see there are some 7mm head bolts that are used to hold that lower section, so I'm going to remove just those at this point to allow me to drop this a little bit to give me a little bit more play when it comes to opening up the split section underneath the steering column. But there's one more trim piece I need to get popped out here. So here's the two clip piece on the left side of the steering column, and there's one bolt in there if I recall correctly. Yep. And then there's a couple 7mm bolts on the bottom that we'll be addressing as well. So now you're just gonna watch me remove some bolts. So let's go through this a little faster. And then there are 3 of them, if I recall correctly, down here that I need to worry about. Alright, so now if I pry on this just a little bit, I'll get a little more flexibility out of this whole section, at least up in the top part here. And what I'm going to do is remove the panel over here that has the headlight switch in it. So this will pop down, and then there's a couple tabs that you'll need to work on here. And also this plastic kick panel piece. See, it's beginning to separate there. And there's the tab. I guess there's only one tab. And then walking the panel out, you can disengage the switch by pressing on the clip there and removing the whole panel and taking it out of the way. And then there's a couple more bolts here to let me drop that panel even further. So we have that off. And now I should be able to pull this down a little bit further to give me a little more room around here. And you can stick something in here to... You are pulling on your coin tray here, so if you are purist here about removing everything, you might want to pop that out. But for what I'm trying to do, it's not really required. Just make sure when you're done that the back end of the coin tray is in the holder on the back end through the ashtray area. You can feel that up here. So now that we have more exposure to the lower panel, I'm going to now pop open the lower panel by taking off this adjuster handle and remove the 2 screws if they are present, and on mine they are not. In fact, of the various SSRs I've owned, I've never had one that actually had some, but I believe they are supposed to be there, on some of them at least. So check for those, and I think they're Torx T20. But let me reposition the camera and we'll move forward getting the panel open to get access to the turn signal switch. Alright, now I'm going to pop out the steering column adjuster handle. I'm going to take one of my plastic trim tool pieces here and get it underneath. You can use a screwdriver, just be careful of the plastic. So you just need to pop it out just with a little bit of pressure, and you'll see that there are 2 tabs that are the things that are actually holding it in on the mechanism there, so you don't need a lot of pressure, just you need enough to pop it out. The cover right here is still somewhat entangled with the back of the steering wheel, so you could remove the steering wheel in addition to everything else, but it doesn't appear to be necessary, so you just need to pull it down gently back in the back, and it should pop down like that. Now, the thing to keep in mind with this cover is that tab right here. Let's see if we can get it in view here. Alright, this tab has a ability to deform because it doesn't get inserted correctly. There's a corresponding pin on the side of the steering column that's supposed to wrap around, and as you can see, mine actually got deformed a little bit from a previous removal because it did not engage correctly. It got wrapped around another piece on the steering column. So when you reinsert this, make sure this pin is in the correct position. So we have the cover out of the way. To remove the top cover, there's a E5 inverted Torx screw that's on the passenger side of the steering column that needs to be removed. So I just wanted to, you can see where my wrench is running here, so that's where you need to remove that screw from. Alright, now you're looking at the top cover with that screw removed from this corner over here. So now I should be able to gently pry this up. And I'm going to pop out my cell phone microphone here, which is an added feature that I have in my vehicle. So I'm going to now pry this up, and you should hear it unsnap like that. And hopefully I can remove this without hurting anything else. And apparently I have run some guiding felt there. Alright, so now we can see the top end of the whole steering column, and of course this is the mechanism I'm trying to get to. I'm not going to disconnect any wiring harness items from this, but I just want to gain access to the mechanical interface between the steering column and this unit to see if I can lubricate that, because right now the noise, so not so bad right now on the right direction. Nothing. Let's go left. And there's my plastic noise, and right now in the garage it's only like 80 some degrees. When it's, you know, been out in the sun and the cab is like 120 degrees when you first get in and you turn on the turn signal, you can really hear this. So you kind of get a slight impression of what I'm talking about there. So to remove the turn signal switch mechanism, there's a screw, Torx screw on the top here, and then there's a Torx screw down here, and I've been told that a Torx T20 socket, like a little 1/4-inch drive with a wrench, might be the best way because of the limited space here. We'll see what we can put together here to get that out, but let's work on that now and see if I can pop out the turn signal mechanism. Alright, I'm going to remove the lower Torx T20 screw using this Torx T20 socket or bit driver, and then I'm going to use this 1/4-inch wrench to give me enough space. I might have been able to get a socket, it's kind of tall there, so I am a fan of taking out the lower screws first. That way if there's any movement I don't have to deal with it while I'm trying to deal with this odd wrench situation. I'll take this one out first and then deal with the top one. So there's that one. I'm going to remember the position it was in case it's a different length than the top one. Alright, let's move to the top. Right now I'm going to remove the Torx screw, the T20 on the top. They look to be similar length, but I'll keep them separated just to make sure I don't mess them up. And from what I've read, this should separate now. Now the turn signal mechanism here, there's this little piece here that when you engage left or right, it pushes out, and when the steering wheel turns the direction, there will be a recess and it'll catch it and it'll force it to reset. But you can see that it pushes it out, and that rubbing surface, I believe, is what's making my noise. So what I'll do is I'll clean this off here, and you can see as the steering wheel turns, there's a protrusion in this plastic piece that's supposed to kick off the pin that came from the turn signal mechanism. So that's what it's rubbing against. There is some lubricant there, but we'll see if I can clean that up and put some additional lubricant on there and see if we can eliminate the noise, because it's a plastic on plastic noise. So I think a proper lubrication will hopefully eliminate the issue. I've cleaned the turn signal switch, and I've added the silicone lubricant to the tab and also the plastic area adjacent to it to make sure that it's well lubricated. Not an excessive amount, just enough to make sure it's lubricated on its surface. Now looking at the steering column, there's the plastic ring that turn signal pin contacts, and there's basically a cam or eccentric ridge in that plastic. As you turn the steering wheel, there's a high ridge point which is actually pointed to the left towards the turn signal switch when the wheel's in its center position. So when you turn the wheel, the recess will be encountered by the pin, and then when you turn the wheel back towards the center, whichever direction it might go, it hits that ridge, and that causes that pin to turn the turn signal switch off. So I've lubricated the whole plastic ring on the steering column side of it. Not an excessive amount, just make sure it's fully lubricated, because there was some lubrication there before. Just want to make sure that it actually has a good amount there, but not an excessive amount. Now let's go ahead and put the turn signal switch back in its place. I won't use the screws yet. I just want to make sure I put it in place and attempt to move it to make sure that the noise has been eliminated or not. Before I put any screws back in, I'm just going to hold it in position and try to see what... So in the off position, I hear no noise. I hear a little bit of something there, but nothing like before. Make sure I'm in fully. So now if I turn the steering wheel, I think that's actually pretty quiet compared to before. So now if I turn left, and so the on-off mechanism's working, it just seems to be a bit quieter. So I think we'll be successful. Let's get it all screwed together and see what it sounds like then. I'm going to now put the bottom screw in. I found my box and wrench, so hopefully this will be a little easier than the open end wrench I was using before to take it out. Not going to tighten that one up all the way until we get the top one in. Don't want to have to force anything. So all I'm doing is reinserting the Torx 20 screw on the top with the T20 screwdriver. First I'm going to make sure it's seated. Yep. Alright, that one's tight. And now we're going to tighten this one up. It's back in position. Alright, let's test again. That's in the off position. I don't hear anything. Okay. It seems quiet to me. I think we're successful. Now it's just a matter of getting the trim pieces back on. So here is the bottom side of the top cover, and you can see that there's that E5 Torx inverted Torx screw here, but everything else is a clip or positioning pin, and then the rubber piece here is what covers up the rest of the steering column so that you don't see it underneath the instrument panel. So I'm going to reinsert that and re-engage those locating pins and the snap pins in place, and then I'll go from the bottom side and reinstall that E5 inverted Torx screw. So let's push the steering column to its full down position to give me the most room here. You want to make sure you don't snag any wiring while you're doing this. You shouldn't, but again, you have to get this section underneath the steering wheel bezel here, so you have to work on it a little bit. Push down in the middle, that should give you the play you need for that. And there's the snapping of the pins into place. And I can see that my four-way flasher is located in the proper position. Right behind the zip tie area here is this pin that I'm talking about. So that pin needs to correspond to this tab right here. And if it's not aligned correctly, you might bend the plastic on this cover either to the side or somewhere where it's not going to snap in fully. And if there were screws, there would be a screw that would go in there. Mine has never had any of the 4 different SSRs that I've owned. None of them, and they were one of each model year, and none of them had the screws, but one could, I guess, put one in there, but it should be sufficient to snap this all together. So let's go ahead and do that. So going to drop this just a little bit to get me a little more room. And try to go the feeling for the pin, and I can feel that it's behind the wire in the zip tie area. So I'm now going to push this up, making sure those alignment pins are getting snapped into the proper place, because those are supposed to align the ends of the cover. And I need to get it underneath the steering wheel so that we're not rubbing there. And I got the pin there. And now I'm going to make sure, okay, I can feel in that area, see where that red zip tie is? Right behind that is where I'm going to put my finger behind, and that plastic snap is around that pin. So that appears correct. And now I'm going to engage the rubber piece from the top onto the bottom, and we'll do that same thing on the other side. Making sure we're all together here, and we are. And we're all together on this side. So we're together here. Alright, I have the rubber piece engaged here fully. I was able to reach behind here with this pulled down and engage the rubber piece over on the passenger side of the steering column. And this is all together now, and I can move without any plastic rubbing. So if this is fully together, the front plastic pieces should be inside of the steering wheel plastic, and there should be no noise from that. And I have no more plasticky noise. Yay! Alright, let's get it all back together. So the steering column adjustment lever is just a pop-in thing. Again, there's the 2 tabs at the end of that, and you just pop it into place. And now that we're done adjusting everything here, I'll pop that side of the dash lower cover back into place. One of the important points to get this aligned properly is there's a small tab on the side here that engages the side of the dash. When I was originally trying to put this in, it was setting off to the side. That's why it looked kind of funny. So make sure that you pull it out and it's right here on the side here, on the inside of course, but get that aligned properly. And it should go together much better now. Now we're going to get the trim pieces put together. Once I put the two screws in here, I'm going to make sure the coin tray is in its full position, because we did pull on it a little bit. And there's a metal clip that comes from the inner part of the dash that grabs the end of it. I just want to make sure it wasn't pulled out of that, and it wasn't. And now let's get the trim pieces back on. And again, since there's a little bit of a tight space area here, you put that in first. And you push the pins in. Snaps in. Alright. Put the steering wheel to a more natural position. And no more plastic rubbing noise. Yay, I think I've been successful. The true test is if I can say that after like a month in the heat. But the original noise that I was even hearing in the garage here is gone. So I think we were successful. So there you go. If you need to get in to get to your turn signal switch for replacement, which is of course a multifunction switch, or if you need to do an ignition switch replacement, you know how to get the panels open and gain access to those, and have hopefully a little bit more comfort knowing that you can tackle one of those jobs, because it's not a overly difficult task. As what I was doing, most of it was just getting to the location, and the actual fix itself was fairly straightforward. So with that, I think we've completed this noise repair, and of course it was more of an annoyance to me alone. Nobody else really noticed it, but if you're driving it, it was kind of annoying to me, especially in the warmer months. And since we're getting to that point in California at this point, I wanted to make sure it was addressed, and I wanted to know if I needed to get a different switch, because it was still a question whether it was the physical plastic piece that had been broken in some way, or something on the steering column that had been broken, but everything looked like it was intact just fine, and it operates correctly. It's just a matter of it was plastic on plastic, and the existing lubricant had been moved away based on time. This concludes the Chevy SSR turn signal switch noise reduction video. Hopefully the SSR owners out there have found this to be helpful, and I hope you come back to the channel, look for additional videos related to SSRs and other vehicles. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up button. If you're stopping by the channel for the first time and you want to, please subscribe. Click that bell icon to get notified when I upload new videos. Please follow Retro Car Guy 530 on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks for taking the time to visit the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.